Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be using dot1Q encapsulation, the IP helper command, and VLANs. So let us begin. Let's pull up Packet Tracer. So we're going to build this from the bottom up. Actually kind of the outside in. So we'll put these three over here. And let's give them a little color to signify that they're going to be all in different subnets. So I'll make this one green. And make this next one, there we go, blue. And our last color we'll make, there we go, like a pinkish red, there we go. All right, next we need to bring in a switch. Now with the switch, we need to plan out what VLANs are going to be on what ports. So we'll want to use, I'll say VLAN 2, VLAN 3, and VLAN 4. So VLAN 2, we have to think of a name. We'll think of this as a K-12 school. So the first one, VLAN 2, will be an elementary school. And then the part is going to be a middle school. And then this last one will be a high school. So we have 3 subnets each. So on the left, we'll make that ports, we'll make it 1 through 5. And this will be ports 6 through 10. And this will be ports 11 through 15. Our last one that we want to plan for is the trunk cable, which will be gigabit 01, and that'll be going to a router. So let's console into the switch. We'll bring in a computer to do that. And we'll go serial to console. Next, let's go here. We're going out of band, so we don't need an IP address. And enter, enable, and config terminal. And let's interface, actually let's make all 3 VLANs. So we'll go VLAN 2, give it a name, and we call this elementary. We'll exit, and we'll go into VLAN 3, give that one a name, a middle. And next we'll go into VLAN 4, and we'll make that high school. So elementary, middle, high. Next we want to turn them on, so we'll interface with VLAN 2. Notice how the status right there was noticed as changing the state to up. And if you forgot the commands, you can add them here. If you wanted to add an IP address to a VLAN, like if you had a management VLAN, you could, so you could SSH in. I just want to leave it on, so I'm going to say no shutdown. And interface with VLAN 3. No shutdown. Oop. And then interface with VLAN 4. No shutdown. Lastly, let's interface with the gigabit 01. Switch port mode trunk. You have to remember everything you've plugged into, what your laptop or computer are plugged into, is an access port. A trunk port is special. It's understood by routers and switches. If you plug a trunk cable into your laptop, it's not going to work. It needs to be an access port. Trunk ports carry every VLAN. It adds that tag to the IP address, so, or I'm sorry, to the packet. So, switch port mode trunk, no shutdown. Good. Now we need to interface with the ports to actually assign them to each VLAN. So int range 1 to 5. Switch port, it's an access port, not a trunk. VLAN 2. And if we exit, we can interface with the next range, which will be from 6 to 11, or 6 to 10, I'm sorry. Type in no shutdown. Oh, I realized I didn't turn on the other ones. It's okay. Saying no shutdown means it's administratively up. It will be on no matter what. So I will type in switch port access VLAN 3. And we'll exit. Interface range, fast access 011 to 15. No shutdown. Switch port access and VLAN 4. It's very important to take notes, otherwise you'll get the numbers mixed up. Now I'm going to administratively turn on the first range because I forgot to do that. So int range fast access 1 to 5. No shutdown. Good. So our switch is configured. Let's save our work. Copy running config, startup config. And we are now done with the switch. Okay. Let's bring in a router. And let's connect our proper ports. So this computer, PC0, will connect to port 1. PC1 will be port 6. And port 11 will go over here. Okay. Just as we did with the switch, we're going to take notes on the router and label our different networks. So there is a network that we're going to be planning in the top left. But let's first finish what we've done at the bottom. So we'll move this. Let's bring in another computer, and we'll console into the router. RS-232 to console. Okay. Okay. So this new subnet that'll be coming in, just we'll say it's an administrative one, and we'll make it a 10.0 this time. 10.0.0 and actually .0/20. Let's not do a 24. Let's make it smaller, a /28. So we're allowing for 15 IP addresses instead of 255. And that'll be on port gigabit 0. We'll say 01. Now the ports on the bottom, gigabit 00, we're going to have 3 different interfaces with it because we have 3 different VLANs at the bottom. So we'll use 00.2, gigabit 00.3, and gigabit 00.4. And the IP addresses of each would be, let's plan this to be 192.168.1.0. And we will make these one class C's, 192.168.2.0, and 3.0. Actually, no, let's make it a little more realistic. Let's say these are, make all these /20. It would be a really large school. Okay. So we can get that going momentarily. The trunk port will go to port gigabit, let's see, that'd be 00. All right. So we can connect that here. Our trunk port to gigabit 00. And it's off by default. Let's leave it that way until we get everything else set up. Bring in a switch. 2960. We're not going to configure this. This is just going to be a way for the servers to connect through one connection on the router rather than using multiple ports. I'll bring this a little closer to keep it clean. Okay. Next on the computer, notice the server. Bring several of them in. We'll bring in 1, 2, and 3. We'll start off easy and we'll make it more difficult. So we'll say web server will be the first one. And that's its IP address will be 10.0.0.2. If you notice, I made a mistake with the router. I made it a .0, so let's make it a .1. And this will be a /28. And we'll make this .1. Okay. And this will be our DNS server. And 10.0.0.3 /28. And our DHCP server will be 10.0.0.4 /28. All right, now I have not assigned IP addresses to those bottom 3 computers, and the reason I haven't done that is because we're adding a DHCP server to the network, and we won't need to statically assign them. So let's set the web server first. That one's the easiest. 10.0.0.2. It's going to default to a class A, but we're switching it to a classless one of 240. That's a /28, again allowing 15 IP addresses. The default gateway is going to be 10.0.0.1, the first IP address of the subnet. And our DNS server is going to be .3, which we wrote out on the computer names. Next, go to services, and you will see we have DHCP, we have DNS, and web server. But web server is already on. We don't have to do anything. It's already set up. So that one's good to go. You can hover above it just if you want to double check things. Next, we'll do DNS. 10.0.0.3. And again, change the default subnet mask, but we don't need to make it that large. And a default gateway of 10.0.0.1. And this one will be our DNS servers itself, actually, so we don't need to put 10.0. We would have to put a loop back here. You can put its IP address, but it's best practice to put a loop back on the DNS server itself. That means itself. So anytime you see 127.0.0.1, that means that exact computer itself. Next, we'll go to services and choose DNS. And we're going to make the web server just website.com and type in its IP address of 10.0.0.2. We'll add it, turn it on. Don't forget to turn it on. Double check that the IP address is correct. It's .3, correct subnet mask, 10.0.0.1, loop back for itself. Good. DHCP. This one's a little bit trickier. Don't worry, we'll get you through it. 10.0.0.4, 255.255.240. Oh. Default gateway of 10.1, 10.0.0.1, and the DNS is 10.0.0.3. Good. Okay, services, DHCP. Okay, a pool is meant to be the IP addresses for each subnet. We have 3 of them that we're going to be giving IP addresses to. Servers are typically statically assigned, or they use dynamic DNS. We are only giving IP addresses to the left, middle, and right subnets here, which is respectively elementary, middle, and high school. So the start IP address, as we planned out, is 192.168, and let's see, we haven't configured this, but it'll be 1.0 from our router. And we're making these a /20, which is a 240.0. It'll allow 4,000 IP addresses, a little bit, like 4,096, I believe. That'd be a very, very big elementary school. So we could say 4094 because we're accounting for the broadcast and the network address. DNS server 10.0.0.3. And the IP address of the gateway 192.168.1.1. And this one, we will call it the elementary pool. The elementary pool. I'm going to add it. Let's just verify everything's right. Let's start it at 2. Good. Good news is there's less typing with the second one. Middle, we switch to 2.1. 2.2. Everything else stays the same because these are large schools. We have apparently 12,000 students. I guess we could justify it by saying they have a laptop and a tablet. So a little bit less. But we have that. We will add them to middle pool. And then we will say high school pool. So high school pool. And this will be .3. .3. And we will add it. So we have elementary, middle, and high. The server pool, you don't need to worry about that one. That's the default one. We are not going to use it. So let's turn it on. Now, just as a side note, you can have different scopes for different ports. Now, I only put on one Ethernet port on this server, but you can put on multiple. And if you did, you could say, well, scopes for this port are this, and scopes for pools for this are this, and different scope or pool for this port. It's cool that you can actually delegate it out that way. But it's on. We're good to go. So let's just verify it one more time. The IP addresses are sound. It's on. DNS. IP addresses are right. DNS is on. Lastly, the DHCP should be .4. It is. Services, DHCP on. Good. All right, let's connect it. Now, since all of these are on the same subnet, I actually don't need to set up multiple VLANs here for this top switch. But if there were multiple VLANs, I would have to do the same setup as I did to the bottom one. All right, now let's start configuring our router before we connect everything. Say no to this one. Enable. Config terminal. And the top one's really easy. Let's just do that. Gigabit 01. Give it an IP address of 10.0.0.1. And remember, this is a /28. And we'll say no shutdown to turn that on. Good, so the top is done. The bottom one, gigabit 00. And that's interface with, actually, didn't mean to interface there. Let's actually interface with gigabit 00.2, the sub interface. Give it an IP address of 192.168.1.1. 240.0. Oh, looks like it's yelling at me right now, so we'll make this a class C and just make the appropriate settings in. So, hold on a minute. Realize I forgot to do dot1Q encapsulation, so we'll do that right now. Type in encapsulation dot1Q. And then the VLAN for this one is VLAN 2. If you forgot the syntax, you can just type in a question mark. And we'll type in no shutdown while we're at it. IP address, it should let us do the classless subnetting here. 1.0. And we'll make this a 255, 255, 240. And I just realized that our subnets are going to conflict, so I'll have to switch this on the DHCP server, so we'll fix that in a minute. So I'll just make these class C's for now. Oh, .1. There we go. It rightfully gave me an error for typing in -0, so that's what it should do. And let's exit out and interface with port .3. And we'll give this one an IP address of 2.1. Again, we just made it a class C, so, right. Wants me to encapsulate the right VLAN, so we'll say this is VLAN 3. IP address of 2.1. No shutdown. Exit. One more to go. And we'll interface with .4. And so I'll make this one a 3.1. Right? I keep forgetting that. .1Q encapsulation 4. 3.1. And we'll turn this on. No shutdown. Good. Now before we connect everything, we should make our correction to the DHCP server scope. So we'll go back. And use DHCP. And you could alter it by saying, all right, the elementary school is actually this subnet mask. And you just save it. And we'll just do that to the others too right now. And we'll want to correct that too. 254. And make that 255. 254. Save. Good. All right. So lastly, let's turn on that port. So interface gigabit 00. No shutdown. We just turned on 3 different interfaces, 3 sub-interfaces. End, type in copy, run, start. Save your work. All it takes is one power outage and you lose your entire config, and that's not a good day. And we'll go over this. Connect gigabit port 1 to this. Now let's show run it, just to verify that everything we did is correct. Show run. All right, .1Q, that's VLAN 2, 1.1. VLAN 3, 2.1. VLAN 4, 3.1. And the top port is 10.0.0.1, and it's a 240. That looks correct. So everything is green. So we should now be able to get IP addresses from here. There is one last thing we have to do. DHCP servers are not, the packets are not sent through the router. If they did, every router would send out DHCP requests all over the internet. It would be a mess. So by default, routers actually just drop the packets for DHCP servers. So even though we have it there in the right scopes, it's never going to make it to the VLANs. But let's add that to it. So let's interface, config terminal, interface with gigabit dot 2 in this instance. Sure, yep, dot 2. And under IP, you'll find helper address right there. So we will type in IP helper address and look at the IP address of the DHCP server. It's 10.0.0.4. That's important. We'll just copy that right now. Let's exit out and say, wait. Also, port 3. That has the same DHCP server. And you know that other VLAN, the high school? Let's all set them up to the same DHCP server. And again, save our work, which is copy run, start. All right. So these are simulating Windows machines. If it fails, it's going to get what's called an APIPA. Microsoft, came up with a system where if it doesn't get an IP address, like it'll search and search and search, but it won't get it, it'll auto-assign to a Class B subnet, which is what we're seeing right here, 169.254. If you ever get that, yes, you have an IP address, but it means that you're not online. So it does take a minute for this to come online the first time, so we'll give it a minute. Well, actually, it just worked. So 192.168.1.2, so hey, it worked. We should now be able to get to the web server, but let's verify. The elementary school's online. Let's check the middle school and DHCP. You'll notice it should be a different scope it's getting. This is a 2.0 network. Excellent. And this one should be a 3.0. DHCP. And it is. It's 3.2. So it means we set it up correctly. Now let's just test, I believe it was website.com. That's what we did. Now it does take a minute first time, so, and it works. So we know our web server is working because we wouldn't get this website otherwise. DNS is working because we typed in an A record and it resolved the right IP address of the web server. And DHCP is working because all three VLANs got an IP address from a different subnet. So this is a complicated network setup, but it's an important one to understand because it incorporates VLANs, encapsulation, IP helper addresses, DNS, DHCP, web servers like Apache 2, Nginx, IIS. So practice this one. It's a great one to learn just how networks are structured and why they are the way they are. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.